There is a moment in every thinking person's life when they realize that the human mind was not designed for the world we have created. Alan Turing understood this long before the Internet existed, long before smartphones flooded our consciousness with notifications, long before artificial intelligence began to mirror the very structure of human thought itself. He understood something that most people still refuse to acknowledge. The human brain is a machine, and like all machines, it has limits. It has bandwidth. It has a processing capacity that, when exceeded, does not simply slow down gracefully. It breaks. It deforms. It becomes something other than what it was meant to be. This is not a comfortable idea. We live in a culture that celebrates the ability to multitask, to stay connected, to absorb information at unprecedented speeds. We wear our busyness like a badge of honor. We brag about how little sleep we need, how many emails we answer, how many tabs we have open in our browsers. But Turing saw through this illusion. He saw that every piece of information we consume, every notification we process, every decision we make in rapid succession, leaves a mark on the architecture of our thinking. And when you accumulate enough marks, the structure itself begins to warp. The question is not whether information overload is real. The question is whether we have the courage to understand what it actually does to us. Because once you understand it, you cannot unknow it. Once you see how the human mind deforms under the weight of too much information, you begin to see the deformation everywhere. You see it in the way people struggle to focus. You see it in the epidemic of anxiety and depression among those who grew up with constant connectivity. You see it in the way our capacity for deep thought has atrophied, replaced by the ability to skim, to scan, to process without understanding. And you realize that Turing was describing not a future problem, but a present catastrophe that we have normalized so completely that we no longer recognize it as a catastrophe at all. Turing lived in an era when information was scarce. A mathematician in the 1930s and 1940s had access to perhaps a few hundred papers in their field. They could read them all. They could hold the entire landscape of human knowledge in their domain, within their mind. They could think deeply because there was space to think. But Turing was already worried. He was already seeing the early signs of what would happen when information became abundant. He was already asking the question that nobody wanted to ask. What happens to the human mind when it is forced to process more information than it was evolutionarily designed to handle? The answer, he suspected, was deformation. Not destruction, but deformation. The mind would adapt, yes, but the adaptation would come at a cost. It would develop new structures, new ways of processing, new shortcuts. But these shortcuts would come at the expense of something else. Something would be lost. Some capacity would be sacrificed. Some part of what makes us human would be traded away in exchange for the ability to keep up with the flood. This is the central insight that Turing left us with, hidden in his papers and his correspondence, waiting for someone to notice it. And now, in an age when the average person is exposed to more information in a single day than a medieval scholar encountered in a lifetime, we are finally beginning to understand what he meant. We are finally beginning to see the deformation. But what exactly is being deformed? That is the question we must ask, because if we understand what is being damaged, we might have a chance to protect it. We might have a chance to reclaim some part of our minds that we have already lost without even realizing it was gone. Consider the structure of human attention. For most of human history, attention was a resource that was relatively abundant. You could focus on one thing for hours. You could sit with a problem and let your mind work on it, turning it over, examining it from different angles, allowing insights to emerge slowly and naturally. This kind of deep attention is not a luxury. It is the foundation of all human achievement. Every great work of art, every scientific breakthrough, every philosophical insight has emerged from the ability to focus intensely on a single problem for an extended period of time. But information overload does something to this capacity. It fragments it. It teaches the mind that it is more important to be responsive than to be deep. It trains the brain to expect interruption. It creates a kind of cognitive restlessness where the mind is always scanning for the next input, the next stimulus, the next piece of information that might be important. And once this pattern is established, it becomes difficult to break. The mind has been rewired. The neural pathways have been reorganized. The very structure of attention has been deformed. Turing understood this because he understood how machines work. He understood that a machine is not just a collection of parts. It is a system of relationships, a network of connections, a structure that determines what the machine can do and how it does it. Change the structure, and you change the machine. Deform the structure, and you deform the machine. And the human brain, Turing believed, is a machine. Not in the sense that it is mechanical or cold or without consciousness, but in the sense that it operates according to principles, that it has a structure, that it can be understood and analyzed and, yes, deformed. This is where most people misunderstand Turing. They think he was saying that the human mind is nothing but a machine, that consciousness is just computation, that there is nothing special or sacred about human thought. But that is not what he was saying at all. He was saying something far more subtle and far more troubling. He was saying that the human mind, whatever it is, has a structure. And that structure can be damaged. And information overload is one of the primary ways that structure is being damaged in the modern world. Think about what happens to your brain when you are exposed to constant information. The first thing that happens is that your brain has to work harder to filter. It has to decide what is important and what is not. It has to prioritize. It has to make rapid judgments about what deserves your attention and what does not. This is exhausting work. It is cognitive labor. And when you are doing this labor constantly, all day, every day, your brain becomes fatigued. Not in the way that your muscles become fatigued after exercise, but in a deeper way. The systems that manage attention and decision-making become depleted. The neurotransmitters that support focus and concentration become depleted. The very capacity to think clearly becomes diminished, but there is something else happening too. When your brain is constantly filtering information, it is not just becoming tired. It is also being trained. It is learning that rapid response is more important than careful consideration. It is learning that breadth is more valuable than depth. It is learning that the ability to process many pieces of information quickly is more important than the ability to understand a few pieces deeply. And once the brain has learned these lessons, it is very difficult to unlearn them. The deformation becomes structural. It becomes part of who you are. Turing saw this coming. He saw that as information became more abundant, the human mind would be forced to adapt, and he suspected that the adaptation would not be a happy one. He suspected that we would lose something in the process, something essential, something that we would not even realize we had lost until it was too late. What is that something? It is the capacity for what we might call contemplation. It is the ability to sit with a question, to let it work on you, to allow your mind to make connections that are not obvious or immediate. It is the ability to think thoughts that take time to think. It is the ability to read a book and actually absorb it, to listen to a piece of music and actually hear it, to have a conversation and actually understand what the other person is saying. These are not luxuries. These are fundamental human capacities, and they are being eroded by information overload. The tragedy is that we have convinced ourselves that this erosion is progress. We have told ourselves that the ability to process information quickly is more valuable than the ability to understand it deeply. We have celebrated the person who can juggle 10 projects at once, who can answer emails while on a phone call while watching a video. We have made a virtue out of what Turing would have recognized as a deformation. We have normalized the abnormal. We have made the pathological seem healthy. But here's the thing that Turing understood, and that we are only now beginning to rediscover. The human mind is not a general-purpose processor. It is not designed to handle arbitrary amounts of information. It is designed to handle a certain amount of information in a certain way, at a certain pace. When you exceed those parameters, you do not get a faster or more efficient mind. You get a deformed mind. You get a mind that is less capable of the things that make us human. You get a mind that is more reactive and less reflective. You get a mind that is more scattered and less focused. You get a mind that is more anxious and less at peace. And the worst part is that this deformation is not something that happens to other people. It is happening to you. It is happening to all of us. Every time you check your phone, every time you open a new tab, every time you respond to a notification, you are participating in your own deformation. You are training your brain to be less capable of the things that matter most. You are sacrificing depth for breadth, understanding for information, wisdom for knowledge. Turing did not live to see the internet. He did not live to see smartphones or social media or the explosion of information that has characterized the last 2 decades. But he understood the principle. He understood that the human mind has limits. He understood that when those limits are exceeded, the mind does not simply fail. It adapts. It changes. It becomes something different. And he suspected that what it becomes is something less than what it was. The question now is whether we have the wisdom to learn from his insight, whether we can recognize the deformation that is happening to us and take steps to resist it, whether we can reclaim some part of our minds that we have already lost, whether we can create spaces in our lives where information is scarce, where attention is abundant, where the mind can work at its natural pace, at its natural depth. Because if we do not do this, if we continue on the path we are on, then Turing's warning will have been prophetic. The human mind will continue to deform. Our capacity for deep thought will continue to atrophy. Our ability to focus will continue to fragment. And we will become something other than what we were meant to be. We will become machines that process information, but we will lose the capacity to understand it. We will become connected to everyone and everything, but we will lose the ability to truly connect with anyone or anything. We will have access to all the knowledge in the world, but we will lose the wisdom to know what to do with it. This is the deformation that Turing feared. This is the catastrophe that we are living through. And the question is not whether it is real. The question is whether we have the courage to acknowledge it and the will to do something about it. Because here is what Turing understood that we have still not fully grasped. The deformation is not accidental. It is not a side effect of progress that we can simply manage or mitigate. It is built into the very structure of the systems we have created. Every notification, every algorithm, every interface is designed to capture your attention and hold it. Every platform is optimized to keep you scrolling, clicking, consuming. The systems themselves are predatory. They are designed by people who understand exactly how the human mind works, and they use that knowledge against you. Turing saw this coming because he understood that information is not neutral. Information has structure, information has weight, and when you expose a mind to too much information too quickly, without the proper filters and without the proper time to process, you do not simply overload it, you deform it. You reshape it into something that is more responsive to external stimuli and less capable of internal reflection. You create a mind that is reactive rather than proactive, that is driven by external forces rather than internal purpose. The tragedy is that this deformation happens so gradually that you do not notice it. You do not wake up one day and realize that your capacity for deep thought has vanished. Instead, you notice small things. You notice that you cannot read a book without checking your phone. You notice that you cannot have a conversation without your mind wandering to something you saw online. You notice that you cannot sit in silence without feeling anxious. These are not character flaws. These are symptoms of deformation. These are signs that your mind has been rewired by constant exposure to information overload. And the worst part is that once the deformation has occurred, it is very difficult to reverse. The neural pathways have been established, the patterns have been set. Your brain has learned to expect constant stimulation, and when that stimulation is removed, it feels uncomfortable. It feels wrong. So you reach for your phone again, you open another tab, you check your email, and the cycle continues. The deformation deepens. Turing would have recognized this as a form of addiction, but not in the way we typically use that word. It is not an addiction to a substance. It is an addiction to stimulation. It is an addiction to the constant flow of information. And like all addictions, it is difficult to break because the very thing that is harming you is also the thing that makes you feel alive, connected, engaged. But here is the crucial insight that Turing left us with. You do not have to accept this deformation. You do not have to allow your mind to be reshaped by forces outside your control. You have agency. You have the ability to create spaces in your life where information is scarce, where attention is abundant, where your mind can work at its natural pace. This does not mean rejecting technology. It does not mean going back to some imagined past where life was simpler and slower. It means being intentional about how you use technology. It means understanding that your attention is a finite resource, and that how you allocate that resource determines what kind of mind you will have. It means recognizing that depth and breadth are not the same thing, and that in a world of infinite information, depth is actually more valuable than breadth. It means creating what we might call information fasting, periods of time where you deliberately expose yourself to less information, not more, where you read deeply instead of widely, where you think slowly instead of quickly, where you allow your mind to work on problems without interruption. These periods do not have to be long. Even an hour a day of genuine focus, of real attention, of deep thinking can begin to reverse the deformation. It means being selective about what information you consume. Not all information is created equal. Some information is designed to inform and enlighten. Other information is designed to manipulate and distract. Learning to distinguish between the two is one of the most important skills you can develop in the modern world. It means understanding that the human mind is not a machine that can be upgraded or optimized like a computer. It is a biological system that has evolved over millions of years to work in a certain way, at a certain pace, with a certain amount of information. When you exceed those parameters, you do not get a better mind. You get a broken one. Turing's warning was not about technology itself. It was about what happens when we allow technology to reshape us without our consent, without our awareness, without our understanding of the consequences. It was about the importance of protecting the structure of human thought from forces that would deform it. And that protection begins with awareness. It begins with recognizing that information overload is not a neutral phenomenon. It is a force that is actively reshaping your mind, your attention, your capacity for deep thought. It begins with understanding that you have the power to resist that force, to create spaces where your mind can work the way it was designed to work. This is the challenge that Turing left us with. This is the question that we must answer. Will we allow our minds to be deformed by the systems we have created, or will we have the courage and the will to protect them?